Hello and welcome to Moneylife. This is Sucheta Dalal. As the year comes to an end, let's talk about banking services. That's where we put our money for safekeeping. Are we happy with how banks serve us? We are the biggest stakeholders of banks, and if you ask around, most people are kind of dissatisfied with what's happening. So in the middle of all this, I got a call last week from a rather agitated former bank chairman, headed a PSU. He, along with the late SS Tarapur, was instrumental in setting up the Banking Standards and Codes BCSBI, Banking Codes and Standards Board of India. And he called up to tell me, do you know that BCSBI is being wound up along with the RBI's Customer Services Department? I thought for a moment and said, well, that's a good thing. At least the first is, we don't know about the second, but it's worth a discussion. So what I discover is that in the annual report in August, the RBI has already announced that BCSBI is going to be wound up. This is a flawed organization from the word go, with very good intentions set up by the RBI to help customers. It was set up as an independent watchdog. Now we're going to come a little later to why this was flawed, but it has been decided that it will be dissolved with no alternative and replacement. The Customer Services Department is a rather different ballgame. So what the RBI annual report says is that they have set up what they call a Consumer Education and Protection Department. So the Customer Services Department has morphed into what is called the CEPD, and it will now look at a bunch of things. So grievance redress, it's going to do a root cause analysis of complaints, which is what BCSBI was supposed to do. It's going to look at the banking ombudsman scheme. It's going to look at internal ombudsman and whether this should be extended to non-banking finance companies. I think it's long overdue, but they're not recommending it as yet. It also wants to start consumer education, strengthen those cells, and an interactive voice response system, IVRS, on which people, it's like a helpline where people can get answers. Now, I have on very good authority, when we were all agitated about the Customer Services Department being wound up, I have it on good authority that the RBI wants to put something better in place, and that is what interests me and should interest all of us. Now, there are some indications that things will actually move for the better. If you remember, on 2nd December, the RBI actually whacked HDFC Bank, which is our most valuable private sector bank with a huge market capitalization, extraordinary share price, great performance, but really, really poor customer service, innumerable complaints. They were told that because of frequent outages over 2 years, which harassed the customers no end, they would temporarily put on hold a whole lot of their online services, which were revenue generating, including credit cards. They have to fix the system. Now, if you ask me, this is a huge punishment. HDFC Bank would have been happy to pay a fine, but stopping business is for them a far bigger punishment, because they get in new customers like an army operation at a ferocious pace. So when the RBI governor said that he means business and there'll be a better system, there's already a sign of it. December this year, he said something else. Mr. Shaktikanta Das said that the RBI plans to institute a disincentive cum incentive framework to encourage banks to improve their grievance redress mechanism. So to me, that would seem as though they're going to get feedback, and if there is too much of negative feedback, there will be disincentives of the kind that HDFC Bank was whacked with. Now, remember, HDFC Bank is a powerful signal across the system, because it's not about HDFC Bank alone. There are many more complaints, one would say, about State Bank of India, which is a big elephant in the banking system in terms of size and reach, and outages and closures are so endemic to its SBI. Customers are really, really frustrated. So warning bells have been rung. The smart banks should take note of it. So RBI says that it's going to put in place an institutional mechanism to look at grievance redress and customer services. I would like to submit that an institutional mechanism is only as good as the feedback that it gets. If you have a closed loop and you only get feedback from banks, which is what the RBI does because it lives in an ivory tower, then your feedback mechanism itself is going to be flawed, and the institutional mechanism that you set up is going to be based on that. RBI has this stand, doesn't like customer complaints, in the past has never liked them. It has gone so far as to go to the Delhi High Court and say, in response to a PIL, that customers cannot use litigation as a weapon to challenge financial and economic decisions by the central bank. Well, in that case, the RBI has to act on our behalf, which it hasn't done. Now, let's look at the flawed institutional mechanisms over the last decade, okay, or more. In fact, 2006. So when I said BCSBI, it was set up in 2006. Why? Because there were an enormous number of customer complaints at that time. People were being harassed. Credit cards were hawked at airports and stations. People were hounding you to buy them, like, you know, the ferrywalas on the road when you go to a very, like the Gateway of India or something. This is not the way financial services have to be sold. So what did BCSBI do? Absolutely nothing. So it was set up as a part of the RBI, headed by a retired RBI deputy governor, got these huge offices at Bandra Kurla complex and operated out of another ivory tower. It was supposed to hand over to the Indian Banks Association, which is, you know, from the frying pan to the fire, because as long as BCSBI, so imagine the flaw, it's visualized as an independent watchdog, fully funded either by RBI or banks, headed by a former deputy governor responsible for all the rules that are wrong, or a former bank chairman, and it's going to act as a watchdog for us consumers. How ridiculous is that? So obviously it didn't work from the word go, and it was a body which sat and made rules, got banks to sign on it. It went nowhere. So now that it's being dissolved, according to me, that's the best piece of news, because it shows that the RBI is willing to take tough decisions. What I like best is it's not being morphed into something else, like, you know, Planning Commission into Niti Aayog. It is going to be dissolved. This is possibly happening because it's being run by the Indian Banks Association, not the RBI anymore. Now, the RBI's explanation for what it's doing for customers is, hey, look, we've got a consumer charter in place. This happened in 2014 under Raghuram Rajan. They consulted many of us who are part of NGOs which are looking at the financial services space. We were really happy. They identified 5 points in the charter, which are 5 consumer rights. Again, we are very happy. So what are these rights? Their 5 basic rights are right to fair treatment, right to transparency, right to fair and honest dealing, right to suitability of products, right to privacy, and right to grievance redress and compensation. But like the 10 commandments of Moses, these 5 commandments are in name only, because if you do not have a punishment attached to the flouting of those rights, rights have no meaning, and banks have obviously just ignored them. We have made this point since 2014, but nobody gave a damn. We wrote about it. In fact, one of the things that was removed from these 5 rights was the right to non-discriminatory treatment. This is important because if you know, when you're a borrower, if you're a new borrower, you get a lower interest rate. All the old borrowers feel discriminated against because when interest rate falls, new borrowers get a lower rate, and the more loyal ones who've been there for a longer time remain without anything. This is discrimination. In fact, we took this issue to the Supreme Court, but nothing has changed because according to the RBI, it's not even one of the 5 rights that is identified. This can be challenged, but everything unfortunately has to be challenged in a court of law, and when these rights themselves have no real basis except being a motherhood statement, there's nothing to challenge. So let's come to the present. On 18 December, the RBI board looked at customer education initiatives and resolution of customer complaints. We don't know what was the basis, what was the data, how was it presented, but let me look at a couple of things. So the RBI annual report does mention that the banking ombudsman scheme has done well. If you ask me, yes, there is a big improvement. We've been writing about the banking ombudsman scheme and the reports year after year. So what has happened? The rejection of over 57% of the cases has come down to about 29. It's a huge improvement over 3 years. We're showing you a chart over here. And what they have done is 70% of the complaints, the ones which are not rejected, are being settled through mutual conciliation kind of thing. What is still bad is only 98, that is 0.011% led to an actual award, which is Really tiny number, 1.94 lakh complaints were received, out of which 98 got an award from the Ombudsman, probably in favor of the customer, we don't even know, but nothing went to that stage. I think this is a pathetic number, because if compensation has to be granted, it will usually be in the form of an award, and that was something that they promised the last time that the Ombudsman scheme was improved and extended. That's not happened. So obviously this is a work in progress. We're not satisfied with it. Please look at the chart. You'll see an improvement, not good enough. Now, here's an idea that I have. Governor Shaktikanta Das is one of those rare bureaucrats who's on Twitter. Not only that, he is not on a one-way street. He actually reads and listens to his tweets. Just a few days ago, he tweeted that the RBI Twitter account now has 1 million followers. 1 million is a great number. People want to address the RBI. So if the RBI wants genuine real-time feedback on what are the pain points for customers, then make your account a two-way street. This is not rocket science. We know that the late Sushma Swaraj used this beautifully for Indians around the world. She won hearts. The Mumbai police is doing a great job. The Mumbai Municipal Corporation is doing a great job. The railways sometimes does it. So we don't see why the RBI should not be listening to us. I think Governor Shaktikanta Das is capable of doing it. Now, I did a little experiment to see how it would work. So, a couple of days ago, I tweeted this. In fact, on 22nd December, I asked people to highlight customer services issues that agitated them the most. The response has been phenomenal. There are more than 1,000 likes, and there have been hundreds and hundreds of responses. I've tried to collate all of them and put the key pain points. Luckily, the RBI is willing to look at them, but here's what I found. The biggest number one complaint is mis-selling of products. This is outrageous. What is being mis-sold is largely insurance. Even if you want a bank locker, they're selling you a ULIP. It actually sometimes boils down to coercion and extortion. You want a loan, you have to take an insurance. You want to buy a car, you have to take an insurance from who they dictate. It is not all right, and the RBI needs to change that. In fact, RBI has been watching silently for over a decade to this egregious loot of depositors. Then cheating of borrowers of interest charges. This is something we took to the Supreme Court, as I said earlier, and this is the second largest complaint. Again, tens of thousands of crores are lost because the correct interest rate is not passed on to borrowers. The third big complaint is technology. Glitches, outages, bad systems, bad user experience. I think a root cause analysis, which they promise, is required over here. It has to go back to the software giants. We celebrate them. They need to look at the kind of technology they have dumped on banks as core banking software, and until RBI cracks the whip, it's not going to happen. Another one, harassment of customers with KYC repeatedly. You're using the account, you're personally using the account year after year, just because there is a diktat, mindless diktat from the RBI, mind you. We are put through so much of pain. A running account, it's not dormant, it's not unused. There has to be some sense to harassing people over KYC, especially in the last year when people have been asked to come to the branch to submit documents. Even the bankers don't like it, they are harassed. Mis-selling is similar. Even the bankers don't like it. They say there are targets and they're harassed. KYC is something. Bankers don't want you to queue up with your documents because they are also worried about COVID, but RBI is not listening. So what's the point of your 1 million followers? Then of course, usurious and unfair charges, poor treatment of senior citizens, especially pensioners, and harassment while closing bank accounts or credit cards. This is a funny one. You have apps, you can open an account online, but try closing it. They ask you to come to a branch and harass you endlessly. It takes days and weeks. It's ridiculous. RBI has cracked down on banks. This was in 2006. Banks used to just send you a credit card, start debiting fees. Now, it didn't happen for so many years, but it has started all over again. It's small as yet, but banks know the rules. If RBI wraps them on the knuckles right now, it's going to nip this in the bud. The point is, all this is out there in the public domain. People are writing with names, with examples, with details. RBI needs to start listening. It has to look at social media. Let's not have independent surveys which are not direct from the consumer, because this is the beauty of social media. This is the beauty of technology. If the government of India asks you to use technology to submit data that the government wants, then it should also work in reverse for you, because the government has to listen to you and take action without us doing any more lobbying or court cases to make that happen. I have hopes that the governor is listening and that we will see some results. Let's hope that happens. Meanwhile, have a great holiday season and a great Christmas. And if you like what we say, please share this video blog, because more people that look at it, more safe you're going to keep your own money. Thank you.